Hey everyone, so this is Catfish, the TV show of season 5, episode 16, and it's Candice and Titus. So basically, the catfish's name is Candice, the catfisher's name is Titus. So the story is that Candice is 27 years old and lives in McConnellsburg, Pennsylvania. Um, she met this Titus through a shopping app a few months prior. Um, that shopping app is something that she uses for work to sell things. And she listed a purse for sale, and that's how Titus originally contacted her. Um, but soon enough, they were texting all the time, and she says in the email that she's going through a tough time within her personal life, and Titus has been helping her through it all. He always seems to have time to listen, which is something she has been missing in her life. And Titus says he lives a town over from her, but they still haven't met or anything. Um, they never even talked over the phone. She continues on in her email to say that this is where her story gets complicated. Um, she's been married for the last 7 years, so she's still currently married at the moment, and she has a 4-year-old daughter. For the past year, her husband and herself have not been communicating that well, and because of that, her and Titus have this emotional bond, um, uh, and she feels like she can tell him anything, but then she also feels like she's betraying her husband, which personally I think you are. I mean, um, anyway, I'll get into that at the end of the episode. She wants to come clean with her husband, and face the consequences of it, and she wants their help to make things right. And so, after reading the email, as per usual, Max and Eve call her up on Skype and try to make sure that they got their information correctly via the email and that nothing got screwed up. Candace says she met her husband in basic training, and Max then asks her, tell them over your relationship with your husband. She explains that her husband is a nice guy, but he just refuses to even communicate because because of what he saw while fighting in Iraq, either Iraq or Afghanistan. I don't remember which one, but it's one of the two. And so she explains that her husband's a nice guy. He just refuses to talk to her, even though she feels like he needs to talk about these things, and B, she needs to talk about certain things, and if he's not willing to listen, which she basically said that he's like a brick wall, then what's the point of talking to him? So um she says there has been no infidelity on either party, um on either side, um but she feels like revealing she's been talking to another man about her feelings and what she's going through, and her emotional attachment, um, and she feels like it will crush her husband if she does it. Max then asks her to tell him about meeting Titus. She says she met him she just regurgitates what she told in the email. She met him through a shopping app. She was selling a purse when Titus reached out to her, but he wasn't at all interested in the purse. He was only interested in hitting her up. Her words, not mine. Um, She says talking to him was amazing because finally someone was listening to what she had to say. Neve asked if she ever fantasized about what it would be like if she had met up with him, and she says, yeah, I'll admit it, I thought that the grass would be greener on the other side, basically. Max then asks, or wants to know, why make a mountain out of a molehill? Which was what I was thinking, because I was like, I mean, if you honestly haven't even been doing anything wrong in your eyes, why do you feel the need to come clean to your husband? I mean, they have your messages back and forth haven't really been anything to alert him about. I mean, okay, maybe you can tell him that some guy randomly asked for nude pictures, but I mean, to say that you have been actively talking to another guy about what you're feeling and what you're emotionally going through doesn't seem like anything that's worth mentioning to your husband, especially if it's supposed to be non-threatening or at least non-threatening to the relationship, or just like nothing to worry about. I mean, if it's nothing to worry about, if you're talking to another man, then about what you're feeling, what you're going through, then I mean, there's no reason to tell your husband that. I mean, unless of course you honestly did send nude pictures to this guy and you're just not being honest about it, then okay, fine, whatever, tell your husband. But I mean, Max is right. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I mean, you're just talking to someone to be able to process what you're going through. So why? Yeah. Anyway, on with the episode. And well, she explains that Titus is giving her the emotional support that she needs. But he knows more about her than what she knows about him, and she wants to know more about him before she and she wants to know more about him and the person she's been sharing her secrets to before she talks to her husband about this. Neve and Max then get off of Skype and make their way to Pennsylvania. When they get to the hotel, Candace texts Neve to meet outside of her house because her husband is home. Girl, if you have nothing to fucking hide, then why the fuck do you need to get out the house? Why the fuck do you need to get out the house? I mean, if you really have nothing to hide, and I mean, just get your life. So they ask her to come over to the bed and breakfast that they are at, and she comes over sometime later, a little bit later, and they start talking, and he asks her to explain her past, and she said it was something that was, that she's still dealing with. And she said her dad was a hemophiliac and needed a transfusion. What they didn't know was at the time of the transfusion was that it had HIV within the blood cells. And so he became HIV positive, but he didn't find out until she didn't say how long after they found out, but I'm assuming it's a couple weeks to a few months to maybe even a year or so after the transfusion is when they found out that he was HIV positive, because the way they found out was that her mother tested positive for HIV, and so he's the only one who could have given it to her. So so her mother became HIV positive because she was sleeping with her father. So that's the only real way to, well, not the only real way, but that's one of the ways you could get HIV is by sleeping with somebody. So her mother got HIV because of her father, and her mother, Candace says her mother deteriorated rather quickly and then ended up dying when Candace was only 6 years old. And because of this, her father turned into a raging alcoholic, which I guess is a good term if he's drinking 24/7 pretty much. And so he became a raging alcoholic, and then she didn't say whether or not he actually died, but I'm assuming since she's using the past tense in referring to him, so I'm assuming he died, even though she didn't explicitly state that he died. So basically, she eventually started drinking herself when she was quote unquote old enough to do it. Which is, I mean, if you're wanting to drink, you're gonna find a way to drink, regardless of how old you are. Just saying. Anyway, then she decided to join the military, and that was because she said she wanted to do something with her life. Then she met Jamie, and he pulled her out of alcoholism. Neve then asks how she got to where she is right now. She says that now that she has a kid, her priorities have changed, and she's doing some self-reflection, which is bringing up some old feelings and emotions, basically. And she wants to be able to talk about it, but every single time she tries to talk about it with her husband, he becomes this brick wall, and he won't talk about it. Which I'll give her credit that can become very disheartening when you really want to be able to talk about things, but you don't, and you want to talk about about it with your partner, but they can't, and you really don't want to talk about it with your friends either. So who do you turn to in that instance? So I'll give her credit that I mean, if I were her, I'd probably most likely feel the same way, that if I can't talk to my significant other, then who and I don't really want to talk to my friends about it, who do I turn to? That's not saying that's, I mean, to me that's to me that isn't an excuse to go outside your marriage to basically spill all your secrets to a random stranger. I mean, yeah, well, I mean, a random stranger that isn't a professional therapist, anyway. I mean, if you really need to talk, I suggest going to therapist because I mean, there really isn't anything to be ashamed about to go and going to therapy. I mean, if you need to talk, have them go to a neutral third party who is a professional therapist. I mean, at least then they will have the training and knowledge to help you deal with this as opposed to a complete stranger who isn't qualified to help you, really. Anyway, so hold on. So I'm trying to figure out where I left off my notes here. And then this is where Titus came in, and he was basically this saving grace where he let her talk about her situations and feelings and stuff. And he basically was this outlet that she's been needing. Neve asked about the time she tried to meet up with him, and she said she tried, but Titus refused. She's all concerned because she wants to tell her husband, but she can't really do that when she doesn't even know who Titus is beyond his name and his age and where he lives. Max points out that even though they haven't done any research yet, history has shown on the show that when the catfisher is either in the same town or the next town over and refuses to meet or talk on the phone / Skype, it's because their voice will give them away and it's someone that this person knows. Max further says that it's typically someone the catfishing knows, like I just said, or is of the opposite sex, even if they don't know this person. Candace shows them that what Titus looks like, along with the text. And you point out that the text seem very, very flirty, but she doesn't really say anything about that. Go by, whatever. They then let let her leave so they can do research. And when she does, Neve and Max, talk for a little bit before they go to this little cafe. And they both think that she's crying out for help, but Max goes further and says that she doesn't seem to just want to say thank you to this good Samaritan for listening to her. She actually wants to. I feel like it's because she actually wants to see if Titus is real. And is the person in the photos, and if he is, then she would possibly pursue a relationship with him, in case her marriage to her husband doesn't work out. That's what I think. I think she has ulterior motives other than meeting Titus to say thank you, because she could just say thank you in a text and that's it. But she's like, what? Why does she need to actually meet him? Regardless of if he's actually real or not, or if he's the person in the photos, regardless of that fact, and you still want to tell your husband, you could just tell your husband. Anyway. So they go to the cafe and start the research. After a brief summary of all the knowledge they know so far, Neve suspects it's a woman who was on the other end. Max says it's either a woman or someone she knows, which is personally what I think. I think it's someone she knows. And then they first look up the phone number, and it comes up to a texting app called Pinger. Then Neve thinks that the person using the texting app is using it because Candace would otherwise recognize the phone number, which is a very valid point. I think that's true as well. They then reverse image search the one photo that she received of Titus. And it turns out it's linked to this website called Stevenum. And they look up the website and it takes them to an Instagram account. The name on the Instagram account is Steven Venom. And he is living in Sacramento, California. They then look him up on Facebook, and it says he's a mechanical engineer, or a mechanical contractor, sorry. And clearly Titus is not the person in the photos, but they have no idea who Titus actually is. So they look up the app and look up the shopping app, and then look at the Titus profile. And underneath the on the profile, it has a name Spencer D linked to it. And so they think maybe it's Spencer Duncan because Titus is using the last name Duncan. So they figure, if Titus is still using the last name Duncan, maybe Spencer's last name is also Duncan as well, since it starts with a D. So they look up Spencer Duncan via Google, and they come up with this. The first thing that they come up with is that the Spencer Duncan is a Army specialist, and he died on August 6th, 2011, so about 4 or 5 years prior. He died. I think 5 years prior, because I think it was 2016 when this year that they did this episode. So anyway, Spencer is buried in Chambersburg, apparently. And then Max feels like Candace will know the name Spencer D when they tell her. So they go over to meet her, and Max thinks that it's someone. As they do that, Max still thinks it's someone that she knows, and they just don't want to know and want to tell her who it is. So, anyways, they go back to the bed and breakfast, have her come over and tell her what they found. They first tell her of the texting app and figure if he used his real number, it would come back to his or her real name. They then show her the information on the photo and where it leads would be, aka the URL and Instagram, and then they go on to Steven's Facebook. So they basically reveal that Titus isn't who he says he is, isn't the person in the pictures. And they show that when they go to her profile on the shopping app, they can see her real name. So they go to Titus's profile on the shopping app, and it shows the name Spencer D. And almost like 2 seconds later, almost like a second later, he's like, "Oh, I know someone named Spencer D," or "I knew someone named Spencer D." Without any prompting whatsoever, like literally the second later, she's like, "I know someone named that." But she said that he died in Afghanistan. So Neve and Max say it's weird that Titus and Spencer have the same last name. So Spencer asks who else knew about their her and Spencer's friendship. She says people in basic training know, but only one person who went to basic training with her lives in Pennsylvania, and he lives in Philly, which could explain why he never meet. He could never meet and everything. Max asks her if he ever had a crush on her, and she's like, I don't think so. So the guy who lives in Philly could possibly know about the shopping app, but it's not really looking like it's him at all. So they then ask her who else knows about the shopping app, and she says her sister knows about it. And she says her sister also knows about Spencer, even though she never met him. Apparently they got in a fight that morning about it. I don't know. She just threw that out there, I guess. Max asks if her sister knows of Titus, and Candic says her sister does know. But she doesn't know too much about Titus or anything. Max then says it could be her sister, and it could be the slinger dude who lives in Philly, the one who knows about Spencer. Personally, I've been on the bandwagon that it's her husband. Ever since I saw the preview of this episode last week, at the end of the Katy Perry episode, I figured it was her husband. I figured, mainly because she like, was like, oh shit, I can't believe it. When they showed that little part at the end of last week's episode. So I figured it was him the entire time. I'll admit that right about here, when they talk about that slinger dude and her sister, I was kind of second guessing myself, but eventually I just I was like, you know what, no. If we haven't seen the husband up until this point, there's no way that it isn't him. There's no way it's not him. I just assume it's him. Anyway, so Max was like, well, it's definitely someone who knows she knew Spencer. Nee then says that it's clearly someone she knows or from her past. And Max says the only way to find out who it is to call the number. And she asked if she should call, but Neve's like, you know what? Normally I do this, but seeing as how this is a sensitive case, I'll let you do it. So she calls the number for the first time ever, and then doesn't get an answer. So she leaves a voicemail telling that Neve and Max are there with her, and she wants to talk to Titus. And then they don't show this, but they then go their separate ways. And then sometime later, Candice calls and tells Neve of a text she got from Titus. And he says the only way he will, the only way he will do anything is if he meets Neve by himself first. Neve then tells her to let him and Max discuss this for a little bit. So Max is like, I don't think you really should do this, but Neve was like, I need to do it because, I mean, come on, if I don't, then we'll never know, like, she'll never have any closure or anything, and yada yada yada. So he texts Titus, yeah, sure, I'll meet you, and Titus says, texts back almost immediately to meet him the following day after lunch at Norlow Park. So the next day, Neve goes over to meet Titus, and lo and behold, it's the husband. Like I said, it's the fucking husband. I figured it was him. Like, I mean, if we had not seen him by the time that Neve and Max told Candice of what they found, it had to be him, because otherwise, I mean, we would have seen him by then. Like, we would have seen him by then. So, anyway, so Jamie says that he knew before he started as Titus that there was something wrong, and was wondering if it was because she didn't want him anymore. And since he couldn't really pinpoint it, he created the profile on the shopping app to figure it out. He tried to get her to send provocative photos to Titus, and she rebuffed him, saying she was happily married. So he ended up feeling stupid and was like, you know what, I'm gonna, delete this profile and stuff, and just, like, say my goodbye, start as Titus or whatever. But then a few days later, he comes home and finds her crying. And so he asks her what's wrong. She shows him a picture of her mother, and that's it. It seems like that's it. Like, he doesn't elaborate at all on what is wrong, and so he just decides to take their daughter to school. And as he's doing that, he ends up getting a text message from Candice, like literally a few minutes later, and she spills her guts about why she's upset, and she says it's because she feels like she's gonna end up dying on their daughter, like her mother did when she was 6 years old. And Eve just explains that she was just looking for more of Jamie, and basically just more of her husband, so that she can be able to say these things to him. And then Jamie and Eve go back to the bed and breakfast, and when they get there, Eve calls Max to ask him to come outside with Candice. And Candice sees it's her husband, and she's like, oh shit, it's my fucking husband. She wants to know why, and he explains he wanted to see if she wanted someone other than him. And she says they've been married for 7 years, and she would never talk to someone else as more than a friend. And somehow, I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. I don't know why. I just don't believe it. And he says that she told Titus other things even he never even knew about. And so they kind of just talk for a little bit, same old, and then they end up leaving for the day. And the next day, Neve and Max go to their house, and they say that they're thinking about couples therapy and all that, so they can get back on track. And then that's basically it. And then they go to the 2 months later, and they're still together. So basically, that is the whole episode. And honestly, my whole thought on it is that, well, I think that the husband did wrong by, trying to set her up and everything. I personally think that she was just as much at fault, if not more so. because the reason I feel like this is because she didn't have to go outside her marriage to talk. I mean, at least as far as another guy goes. If she really didn't want to talk to her friends about all this, and she knew she really couldn't talk to her husband about this, then go to therapy. Just go to therapy. Just go to therapy. Come on, just go to therapy or something. It's not anything to be ashamed of. I mean, I'll admit this little tidbit. I was in therapy before, for various reasons. I'm not going to get into why, because obviously that to me is a little bit personal, but I'm not ashamed to say that I was. So it's just, I don't know why this country has the stigma of going to therapy, and how if you go to therapy, somehow you're weak, and in case of men, that you're not a man because you go to therapy, or just in general for women, that you're just weak and stuff. And it's such a stupid stigma. And if you need help, you need help. At least if you go to someone who has studied psychology and sort of that spectrum of higher education, then at least you know that what they know what the fuck they're talking about. So I just feel like she had this intention of, I feel like by the time that she started talking to Titus, I feel like she was already on the train of thought of wanting to step out of her marriage, because as she even pointed out early in the episode, she had thought about the other side. The grass was always green. The grass was greener on the other side and everything, and so she even admitted that. So I don't know. Yeah, she may be willing to tell her husband about it, but I don't know. I just feel like she was just as much to blame for stepping out on her marriage and talking about this stuff, when she clearly didn't want to really talk about it with anybody else. She wanted to talk about it with her husband, but because he was a brick wall, she's like, okay, whatever. Anyways, I think she was just as much the fault in this whole thing, and if not solely, because I don't think she was solely responsible for this whole thing happening. I think she was just as much the fault as her husband, and I feel like she didn't take any blame in this at all. When it was revealed that it was her husband, I don't think she took any blame whatsoever. I personally think that she tried to play 100% the victim, and try to put the whole sole blame on her husband, and it's just like, no, you had just as much to blame for this as anybody else. So just own up to it, please. Just own up to it. I hate when people don't own up to their shit. That's to me the most irritating, that when someone doesn't own up to their shit. But whatever. Anyway, so it was just, this episode was slightly different than the other things, but for the most part, it was fairly typical. They didn't do they didn't show the next week's episode at the end of this one, so we don't know what the next episode is about. So, I mean, if there is another episode, next episode after this, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm assuming there's a next episode after this one, but, um, yeah, they don't show the next episode after this. Um, so we're just kind of, left and twisting in the winds. Maybe Catfish will put up a little clip of next week's episode on their Facebook page, or on the MTV website itself. I don't know. We'll see about it. So I can't really do any predictions about next week. So, yeah. Anyway, that's the whole episode. Um, with that said, if you like this episode or like this recap, hit like. If you want to see more videos and get notifications of when I post new videos, hit subscribe. And please do not hesitate to discuss this episode and previous episodes, in the discussion below. And I will see you later, in next week's episode, if there is an episode. Bye.